$23 billion. That's what Dominic Harrington built from nothing, a pharmaceutical empire spanning 14 countries. Politicians answered his calls. Competitors feared his name. For 40 years, this man was untouchable. But right now, sitting at the head of his own boardroom table, oxygen tubes in his nostrils, hands trembling against the mahogany, Dominic Harrington is terrified, not of death, of the 23-year-old woman standing across from him. Her name is Zara. Sharp black suit, arms crossed, an expression carved from stone. She hasn't sat down, hasn't smiled, hasn't given him a single inch since she walked through those doors. Dominic slides a leather folder across the table with shaking fingers. Please. His voice cracks like glass. I'm offering you 40% of Harrington Industries, controlling shares, everything I spent my life building. All I'm asking is that you don't destroy my life's work. Zara doesn't touch the folder. She just stares at him, really stares, taking in every wrinkle, every gray hair, every wheeze from those failing lungs. This is the man her mother cried over for 20 years. The ghost who haunted every birthday, every graduation, every moment he should have been there but wasn't. You destroyed your life's work, Zara says, her voice steady as a blade, the day you walked out on my mother. Silence swallows the room. Dominic's face crumbles. His lips part, but the words won't come. Because here's what you need to understand about Dominic Harrington. 20 years ago, he abandoned a pregnant woman, vanished without a trace, built his billions while his daughter grew up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, watching her mother work double shifts just to keep the lights on. Now, with 6 months left to live, a heart that's giving out, and enemies circling his empire like vultures, he needs her, the daughter he never met, the child he threw away. She holds the only key that can save everything he built, or burn it all to ashes. So here's the question I want you sitting with as we go through this story. If the parent who abandoned you suddenly appeared out of nowhere, offering you billions, would you take the money? Or would you make them pay for every single day they weren't there? Tonight, you're going to witness how a billionaire lost everything money can't buy. How a man who owned private jets, politician friendships, and enough power to move markets with a single phone call ended up begging a 23-year-old girl from a tiny apartment to save him. And how that same girl ended up holding his entire legacy in her hands. Now let me ask you something personal. Have you ever thought about what you'd say if the parent who left you suddenly came crawling back? Maybe it's your father, maybe it's your mother, maybe it's someone who was supposed to protect you but chose themselves instead. Would you forgive them? Would you hear them out, give them a second chance, let bygones be bygones? Or would you make them feel every single second of your pain, every lonely night? Every tear your mother shed, every moment you wondered if you just weren't good enough for them to stay. That's the impossible choice Zara is facing. But here's where this story takes a turn nobody saw coming, not even me when I first came across it. This isn't just about a deadbeat father trying to buy back his daughter's love. This is about betrayal at the highest levels, manipulation that spans decades, corporate warfare fought with lies, stolen identities, and family secrets, buried so deep, digging them up could destroy everyone involved. And the most dangerous part? Zara is about to trust the wrong person. See, in business, the biggest threat isn't the enemy you can see. It's the one smiling at you, pretending to be on your side, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. By the end of this story, Zara won't just confront her father. She'll take down an entire corrupt dynasty and turn her mother's 20 years of heartbreak into a legacy that nobody can ever take away. But getting there, that's going to cost her almost everything. Before we crack open Xavier's Billionaire secret vault on this one, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, drop a like if you are into real, lifestyle billionaire drama, and tell me in the comments, would you even show up to that meeting if you were Zara? Yes or no? And I want to know why. Now let's rewind the clock. From Our Satisfat, with love. 3 weeks before that boardroom showdown, Dominic Harrington sat alone in his corner office at Harrington Tower. Rain hammered against the floor, 2 ceiling windows. The city lights below blurred into streaks of gold and white through the water streaming down the glass. At 72 years old, Dominic had everything a man could want. A penthouse overlooking Central Park, a car collection worth more than most people's lifetime earnings, a pharmaceutical empire that generated $200 million in revenue every single quarter. But none of it mattered anymore, because 3 days ago, His cardiologist had delivered the verdict. 6 to 8 months, maybe less. His heart was failing, and no amount of money could fix it. The best specialists in the world had already tried. Experimental treatments, cutting, edge surgeries. Nothing worked. Dominic Harrington was dying, and he knew it. But death wasn't what kept him awake at night. What haunted him was the photograph in his trembling hands. A young woman with dark curly hair and bright, hopeful eyes. Iris, the woman he'd loved more than anyone in his entire life, and the woman he'd abandoned without a single word of explanation. She'd been pregnant when he left. 20 years. That's how long he'd been gone. 20 years of silence while his daughter grew up without a father. 20 years of pretending they didn't exist while he built his empire. Now, with vultures circling his company, with board members plotting against him, with competitors ready to tear apart everything he'd built the moment he showed weakness, Dominic needed an heir he could trust. His legitimate children from his second marriage were useless. Spoiled, entitled, more interested in spending his money than protecting it. But Zara, he'd kept tabs on her. Quietly, from a distance, he knew she'd graduated top of her class. Knew she had her mother's fire and his ruthless instincts. She was exactly what Harrington Industries needed. Iris, Zara. Dominic whispered to the empty room, his voice barely audible over the rain. I don't deserve either of you, but I'm running out of time to fix what I broke. The problem? The only person who could save his empire had every reason in the world to want him dead. Cedar Falls. Population, 12,000. 1 traffic light, 3 churches, and a bakery called Sweet Grace that had been losing money for the past 6 years. This is where Zara Kinsley grew up. Not in a penthouse overlooking Central Park. Not in private schools with kids whose parents owned half the country. But in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment right above her mother's shop, where the smell of cinnamon and fresh bread seeped through the floorboards every morning at 4 a.m. At 23 years old, Zara was holding together a life built entirely on duct tape and determination. 3 jobs, business school at night, and every spare moment spent helping her mother keep Sweet Grace from going under. On this particular evening, Zara stood at the kitchen counter counting coins. $17.63. That was grocery money for the week. She stared at the small pile of quarters and dimes, doing the mental math on how to stretch it into something that resembled actual meals. Downstairs, she could hear her mother closing up the shop. The familiar sounds of trays being stacked, the register being counted, the heavy sigh Iris always let out when the numbers didn't add up. Zara hated rich people. Not in a jealous way, in a deeply personal way. She'd watched her mother work 18-hour days for 2 decades while billionaires on television complained about tax rates. She'd seen Iris skip meals so Zara could have new shoes for school. She'd held her mother's hand during a health scare they couldn't afford to treat properly. Wealth to Zara wasn't something to admire. It was something that existed in a parallel universe, one that had nothing to do with her life. She grabbed her thrift store jacket and headed downstairs. Iris was wiping down the counter, dark circles under her eyes, flour still dusted on her apron. 52 years old, but looking 60. The bakery had aged her in ways that broke Zara's heart. Go home, Mom. I'll finish up. Iris smiled weakly. What would I do without you? Sleep, hopefully. They both laughed, but it was tired laughter, the kind that comes when you're too exhausted to cry. Here's what doesn't make sense yet. How does a girl counting coins for groceries end up with her hands on a $3 billion empire? That answer starts with a black sedan. It showed up on a Tuesday, parked right across the street from Sweet Grace. A luxury vehicle so out of place in Cedar Falls that people actually stopped walking to stare at it. Zara noticed it immediately. Tinted windows, engine running, just sitting there. She ignored it. Wednesday, same thing. Same spot, same car. By Thursday, Zara had enough. She marched across the street, fists clenched, ready to call the police, ready to make a scene, ready to do whatever it took to protect her mother from whatever corporate vulture was circling the bakery. She banged on the window. Hey, I don't know who you are, but nothing here is for sale. Not the building, not the business, nothing. So take your fancy car and get out of our town before I call the sheriff. The window rolled down slowly. Behind it sat a woman in her 50s. Silver hair pulled back tight. Expensive suit, but her eyes weren't cold. They were heavy with something that looked almost like guilt. Miss Kinsley, the woman said softly. I'm not here to buy your mother's bakery. Zara's jaw tightened. Then what do you want? I'm here about your father. The word hit Zara like a slap. I don't have a father. The woman, Celeste Morrow, as she introduced herself, didn't flinch. You do. His name is Dominic Harrington. He's dying. And he wants to meet you. Zara laughed. A cold, bitter sound. Never heard of him. He's offering you 40% of Harrington Industries, controlling shares, worth approximately $1.2 billion, all for a single meeting. The number hung in the air. 1.2 billion. Zara's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Not greed. Something more complicated. Rage, maybe. Or curiosity dressed up as anger. A meeting, Zara repeated flatly. 1 hour of your time. That's all he's asking. And what makes him think I'd give him even 1 second? Celeste's voice dropped. Because he's the reason your mother lost everything, and he knows it. Zara stood frozen on the sidewalk. $1 billion. A dying stranger. A father who vanished before she was born. She wanted to walk away. Every fiber of her being screamed to walk away. But she didn't move. 20 years ago, Iris Chen was the happiest woman alive. She was 29, working as a waitress at a small cafe in the city, saving, up for culinary school, dreaming of opening her own bakery someday. That's when she met him. Dominic Harrington walked into the cafe on a rainy afternoon, soaking wet, looking nothing like the billionaire he would become. Back then, he was just a hungry entrepreneur with a startup pharmaceutical company, and more ambition than money. They fell in love fast. The kind of love that made Iris forget about being practical. The kind that filled their tiny apartment with flour-dusted laughter and late-night conversations about the future. Dominic would sit at their kitchen table, papers spread everywhere, while Iris tested recipes for the bakery she dreamed of owning. When I make it, he'd say, I'm buying you the biggest bakery in the city. She believed him. 3 months later, she discovered she was pregnant. For one beautiful week, everything felt perfect. They talked about baby names, about moving to a bigger apartment, about building a life together. Then he disappeared. No note, no phone call, no explanation. One morning, Iris woke up and he was simply gone. His clothes, his papers, his presence, erased from her life like he'd never existed. She was 5 weeks pregnant with Zara. For months, she tried to find him. Called every number she had. Showed up at his office only to be told he'd relocated with no forwarding address. Eventually, she stopped looking. She moved to Cedar Falls. Opened Sweet Grace with the little money she'd saved. Raised Zara alone. Worked herself to the bone. Cried in the bathroom when she thought her daughter couldn't hear. But Zara heard. She heard every sob, every whispered prayer. Every night her mother talked to a photograph of a man who'd thrown them both away. Now, standing on that sidewalk with Celeste Morrow's offer ringing in her ears, Zara thought about those nights. She thought about her mother's worn hands, her tired eyes, her unbreakable spirit. Zara looked back at the bakery. If I go, she whispered, more to herself than to Celeste, it won't be for him. The next morning, Zara found Celeste waiting in the same spot. This time she got into the car, not because she wanted the money, not because she cared about Dominic Harrington or his dying wishes, but because she had 20 years of words burning inside her chest, and she finally had somewhere to aim them. I need to make something clear, Zara said, staring straight ahead. I'm not going for his money. I'm not going to play daughter for some dying billionaire who wants to clear his conscience. I'm going to tell him exactly what he did to my mother, every single detail. And when I'm done, I'm walking out of his life forever. Celeste didn't argue. Instead, she did something that caught Zara off guard. She nodded, slowly, painfully, like she'd expected this exact response. You should know, Celeste said quietly. I was there. Zara turned to face her. What? 20 years ago. I was his assistant. I was there the day he left your mother. Celeste's hands tightened on her lap. I've carried the guilt ever since. Then why didn't you stop him? I didn't know where he was going. None of us did. One day he was talking about baby names. The next he was on a plane to Singapore with a new business strategy and dead eyes. Celeste paused. Whatever happened that night broke something in him. Zara scoffed. He broke something in my mother. That's what matters. I know. Celeste's voice cracked. But there's more to this story than either of you know. I'm certain of it. Like what? I don't have proof. Just suspicions, things that didn't add up, people who appeared in his life right before he vanished. Celeste looked at her carefully. He's been punishing himself for 20 years, Miss Kinsley. That doesn't excuse what he did. But it might explain it. Zara stared out the window. She didn't want explanations. She wanted justice. She wanted her mother's stolen years back. But somewhere beneath the anger, a question had taken root. What made a man abandon the woman he loved without even saying goodbye? One meeting, Zara finally said. Then I'm done. Celeste started the engine. Be careful what you agree to when you say just one meeting. Harrington Tower rose 47 stories into the Manhattan skyline. Glass and steel and money. So much money that it radiated off the building like heat. Zara stepped out of the sedan and stood on the sidewalk, neck craned back, taking it all in. The logo etched above the entrance. The endless stream of people in expensive suits rushing through the revolving doors. The security guards who looked like they cost more per hour than she earned in a week. This was her father's world. And she'd never felt more like an outsider in her life. Inside, the lobby was worse. Marble floors so polished she could see her reflection. Abstract paintings that probably cost more than her mother's entire building. A reception desk, manned by 3 people who all looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Everyone stared at her. Her thrift store blazer, her worn shoes, her bag with the broken zipper she'd been meaning to fix for 6 months. She didn't belong here. Every glance reminded her of that fact. A security guard approached. Miss Kinsley, that's me. Right this way. Mr. Harrington is expecting you. They took a private elevator to the executive floor. The doors opened onto a hallway lined with more artwork, more marble, more obscene displays of wealth that made Zara's stomach turn. How many scholarships could this hallway fund? How many bakeries could it save? The guard stopped at a massive set of double doors. The main conference room. Mr. Harrington will be with you shortly. Zara stepped inside. 24 leather chairs surrounded a table that could seat a small army. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the entire city, a city where her mother was probably mopping floors right now while Zara stood in a room designed to make people feel small. She didn't sit. She stood at the window, arms crossed, heart pounding. For 20 years, she'd wondered what this moment would feel like, meeting the ghost who'd haunted her entire childhood, facing the man who'd turned her mother into a woman who flinched at expensive cars. The door opened behind her. Footsteps, slow, labored, accompanied by the soft thud of a cane. Zara turned around and came face to face with her father for the first time in her life. He looked nothing like she'd imagined. In Zara's mind, her father had always been a monster, a towering figure of cruelty and indifference, someone whose face she could hate without complication. But the man standing in the doorway was frail, thin, held together by expensive medicine and sheer stubbornness. His skin had the gray pallor of someone whose body was giving up. His eyes, dark like hers, were filled with something that looked terrifyingly close to pain. Dominic Harrington leaned heavily on his cane and took a shaky breath. You came. Zara didn't respond. He moved slowly toward the table, each step clearly costing him effort. When he finally lowered himself into a chair, the silence between them stretched into something unbearable. Then he spoke again. You have her eyes. His voice cracked. Your mother's eyes. I made those eyes cry more times than I can count. You don't get to talk about her. The words came out sharper than Zara intended, but she didn't take them back. Dominic nodded slowly. You're right. I don't deserve to speak her name. No, you don't. Another silence. He studied her face like a man trying to memorize something precious before it disappeared. You look like her, the way she used to look when she was angry with me. That same fire. I didn't come here for your nostalgia trip. Why did you come? Zara's fists clenched at her sides. To tell you that you're going to die knowing exactly what you destroyed. That's your punishment. No amount of money changes that. No shares, no inheritance, nothing. Dominic closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were wet. I deserve that. Good. But I need you to understand something. He leaned forward, his breathing labored. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to save your mother. Zara's expression flickered. What are you talking about? There's a man named Tristan Ashford. He wants my company. And if he gets it, he won't stop there. Dominic's voice hardened. He'll come for everyone I ever cared about, including Iris, including you. The name meant nothing to Zara, but the fear in Dominic's eyes, that was real. Why now? Zara demanded. After 20 years of nothing, why now? Dominic stared at his hands for a long moment before answering. 20 years ago, I received a phone call that changed everything. Zara stood rigid, arms crossed. I'm listening. His name was Victor Ashford, Tristan's father. At the time, we were business partners. He was older, more connected, and I was young and desperate to prove myself. Dominic's jaw tightened. I thought he was a mentor. I was wrong. What did he say? He told me Iris was cheating on me. The words hung in the air like smoke. He had proof. Photographs, documents, phone records, everything meticulously compiled. Dominic's voice dropped. A private investigator's report showing your mother meeting another man. Hotel receipts, text messages. Zara's blood ran cold. That's a lie. I know that now. Dominic's eyes met hers. But back then, I was 28, proud, insecure, terrified that the woman I loved was playing me for a fool. He shook his head slowly. I didn't ask her. I didn't give her a chance to explain. I just left. You destroyed her life because of documents you never verified. I was a coward. Dominic didn't look away. By the time I realized the truth, that Victor had fabricated everything, that he'd hired actors and forged evidence, it was too late. Months had passed. Your mother had disappeared. I'd already signed contracts that gave Victor significant leverage over my company. Why would he do that? Because he wanted me broken, isolated. He knew that if I stayed with Iris, I'd have something worth protecting, something that would make me cautious. By destroying that relationship, he made me reckless, angry. I buried myself in work, made ruthless decisions, built an empire on the ashes of my own heart. Dominic coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Victor got exactly what he wanted, a business partner with nothing left to lose. Zara felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, never that, but a question that wouldn't leave. And Tristan? His son? Worse than his father ever was. Dominic's expression darkened. Victor is dead now. But Tristan inherited his playbook and his grudges. Why do you care what happens after you're gone? Dominic's answer came slowly. Because I tried to find her, Zara, for years. And when I finally did, I watched from a distance, too afraid to face what I'd done. Zara's heart stopped. What do you mean you watched? Dominic reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. Zara, 15 years old, standing outside Sweet Grace in a graduation gown, Iris beaming beside her. I found you 8 years ago, he said quietly. A private investigator tracked Iris to Cedar Falls. I've known where you were ever since. The room tilted. You knew. Zara's voice was barely a whisper. You knew where we were for 8 years, and you never. I helped, quietly. From the shadows, Dominic slid the photograph across the table. Your apartment building. The owner was going to sell 5 years ago. Developers wanted to tear it down. I bought the property through a shell company and kept the rent frozen. Zara thought about all the times their landlord had mysteriously refused to raise their rent. All the times repairs happened faster than they should have. The loan your mother took out to keep the bakery open, Dominic continued. The bank approved it despite her credit score. I made a call. Zara's hands trembled. Your scholarship to business school, the anonymous donor who covered your tuition? That was me. Dominic's voice broke. And 2 years ago when Iris needed that surgery, the hospital bill that somehow got lost in the system, I handled it. Every miracle, every unexplained stroke of luck, every moment Zara had thanked the universe for giving them a break, it had all been him. You were there the whole time, Zara said, her voice shaking with fury and confusion. You could have just knocked on the door. You could have explained. You could have. I was terrified. Dominic looked at her with eyes full of tears. Every time I worked up the courage, I'd see Iris through the bakery window, see how hard she was working, see the life she'd built without me, and I'd think, what right do I have to disrupt that, to force her to look at the man who ruined her? That wasn't your choice to make. I know. He wiped his eyes. Cowardice, pure cowardice. I told myself I was protecting you both, but really, I was protecting myself from having to face what I'd done. Zara stared at the photograph in her hands. Why should I believe any of this now? Dominic reached beneath the table and produced a thick folder. Because this is bigger than my guilt. He slid it toward her. The folder was heavy, stuffed with documents, photographs, financial records. Tristan Ashford has been planning a hostile takeover of Harrington Industries for 3 years. He's been buying shares through proxy companies, bribing board members, and positioning himself to seize control the moment I show any weakness. Zara didn't touch the folder. That's your problem, not mine. It becomes your problem if he wins. Dominic leaned forward, urgency cutting through his frailty. Tristan doesn't just want my company, he wants revenge. His father spent years manipulating me, and when I finally cut ties with the Ashford family, I destroyed several of their shell companies in the process, exposed some of their fraud, cost them hundreds of millions. Good for you. Tristan swore to make me pay, but I'll be dead in 6 months. So, who does that leave? Dominic's eyes bore into hers. He knows about Iris. He knows about you. He knows about the bakery. If he gets control of my company, he'll have the resources to make your lives a living hell, legally, financially, personally. For the first time, something cold moved through Zara's chest. You're saying we're in danger because of you. I'm saying the only way to protect you is to keep Harrington Industries out of Tristan's hands. And the only way to do that is to install an heir he can't challenge. Dominic tapped the folder. 40% controlling interest. Your name on the documents. Legal standing that makes you untouchable. Zara finally looked at the folder. Really looked at it. What's in there? Everything. Financial records proving the Ashfords' history of fraud. Evidence of Tristan's current schemes. Board member communications showing who's loyal and who's been bought. He paused. And something else. Something personal. What? Dominic's voice softened. Your mother kept an email account. A hidden one. I discovered it 2 years ago. Drafts she never sent. Letters she wrote. To me. Zara's breath caught. Letters about you. About the life she was building. About everything she wished she could say to me. Dominic pushed the folder closer. I never read them. They weren't meant for me, but they exist, and they're yours if you want them. Zara grabbed the folder and walked out without another word. The elevator doors closed behind her, and finally, she was alone. Her hands shook as she clutched the folder to her chest. Inside were documents that could change everything. Evidence. Secrets. And somewhere in that pile of paper, letters her mother had written to a man she'd never stopped loving. 20 years. 20 years of wondering. 20 years of watching her mother pretend she was fine. 20 years of hating a ghost who turned out to be hiding in plain sight. He'd been there the whole time. Paying rent. Funding scholarships. Covering medical bills. Playing God from the shadows while Zara scraped together coins for groceries and Iris worked herself half to death. Was that love? Or was it guilt trying to buy its way into forgiveness? The elevator descended floor by floor. 47. 46. 45. Zara caught her reflection in the polished metal doors. Sharp suit borrowed from a friend. Worn shoes she'd polished that morning to hide the scuff marks. Eyes that looked exactly like her mother's. And exactly like his. She wanted to hate him. It was so much easier to hate him. But somewhere between the 17th floor and the lobby, a question crept in that wouldn't leave her alone. What if he was telling the truth about Tristan? What if, by walking away, she was putting her mother in danger? The doors opened. The marble lobby stretched before her. Security guards nodded as she passed. She was 3 steps from the exit when her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. How did it go? Zara stared at the screen. How was she supposed to answer that? Now, if you were Zara right now, standing in that lobby, holding that folder, would you take it home and read every single page? Or would you throw it in the trash and walk away, let the billionaires fight their own wars? Tell me in the comments. And if you're still watching, you're locked in now. Hit that like button so we can keep digging into the mess rich people leave behind. Trust me, what Zara finds in that folder changes everything. Back to the story. Zara found a bench 3 blocks from Harrington Tower and called her mother. Iris answered on the second ring. Baby, what happened? For a moment, Zara couldn't speak. All those years of protecting her mother from hard truths, from false hope, from anything that might reopen old wounds, and now she had to tear all of it open. Mom, I need the truth, all of it. No more protecting me. Silence on the other end. He found you, didn't he? Zara's eyes burned. You knew. Iris's voice came out small, tired. like she'd been holding her breath for 8 years. I suspected. Little things that didn't add up, the rent never going up, the surgery bill that disappeared, your scholarship coming out of nowhere. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you in his world. Iris's voice cracked. That world destroys people, Zara. It destroyed me. I couldn't let it destroy you too. Mom, he's dying. A sharp intake of breath. Then, silence. When Iris spoke again, her voice was barely audible. How long? 6 months? Maybe less? More silence. Zara could hear her mother breathing, shallow, uneven breaths that said more than words ever could. He told me something else, Zara continued, about why he left. He said a man named Victor Ashford showed him fake evidence that you were cheating. Photos, documents, everything fabricated. Iris made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob. I never cheated, never even looked at another man. I loved him so much it made me stupid. I know, Mom. He never even asked me, never gave me a chance to explain, just vanished like I meant nothing. Iris's voice hardened. That's who he is, someone who runs when things get hard. He says there's danger, a man named Tristan Ashford who wants revenge. He says if he doesn't stop him, Tristan will come after us. Another long pause. When Iris spoke, her voice was different, firm, resolved. Then I suppose I need to hear this myself. Zara gripped the phone tighter. What are you saying? I'm saying pack a bag when you get home. Iris took a deep breath. We're going to the city, both of us. If there's danger coming for my daughter, I want to look it in the face. The highway stretched endlessly between Cedar Falls and Manhattan. Zara kept her eyes on the road, while Iris sat in the passenger seat, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Neither of them had spoken much since they'd packed their bags and locked up Sweet Grace for the first time in 12 years. The city skyline appeared on the horizon, a jagged line of glass and steel that seemed to grow taller with every mile. Iris inhaled sharply when she spotted it. Harrington Tower, unmistakable, rising above everything else like a monument to the man who'd broken her heart. 20 years, Iris whispered. I never thought I'd see that building again. Zara glanced at her mother. The fear in Iris's eyes was something she'd never seen before, not when bill collectors called. Not when the bakery nearly went under, not even during the health scare 2 years ago. This was different. This was old pain resurfacing. Mom, the letters you wrote, the ones you never sent, what did they say? Iris was quiet for a long moment. Everything, her voice cracked. Every time you took your first step, your first word, your first day of school, every birthday, every accomplishment. She wiped her eyes. I wrote to him like he was still listening, like maybe somehow he'd know. Why didn't you send them? Because sending them would mean admitting I still cared, that after everything he did, some stupid part of me still loved him. Iris laughed bitterly. Pride, I suppose. Or maybe self-preservation. Zara gripped the steering wheel tighter. Her mother had spent 20 years carrying a torch for a man who'd vanished without explanation, writing letters to a ghost, protecting a daughter who never knew how deep the wound really went. We're done running, Mom. Zara's voice was steady. Whatever happens in that city, we face it together. Iris nodded slowly. Together. 2 hours later, they checked into a modest hotel near Midtown. Nothing fancy. Clean sheets and a working lock on the door. That was all they needed. As Iris unpacked her small suitcase, Zara grabbed her jacket. Where are you going? I've got one stop to make. Alone. Iris's eyes narrowed. Zara, trust me, Mom. I need to hear the other side of this story before we walk into that tower. She was out the door before Iris could argue. The Ashford estate sat on a cliff 40 minutes outside the city. Cold stone walls, iron gates, architecture designed to intimidate rather than welcome. The kind of place that whispered old money and older secrets. Zara's rideshare dropped her at the entrance. She stood there for a moment, staring up at the mansion, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. But she needed answers, and the only person who might give her a different perspective was waiting inside. The gates opened automatically. A long driveway led to the main entrance, where a man stood waiting on the steps. Tristan Ashford. He was younger than she'd expected. Early 30s. Sharp features, expensive suit, smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Handsome in a way that felt calculated. Every detail designed for maximum effect. Miss Kinsley. He descended the steps with easy confidence. I've been expecting you. How did you know I was coming? I make it my business to know things. He extended his hand. Tristan Ashford. I believe you've heard my name. Zara didn't take his hand. Your father destroyed my family. Tristan didn't flinch. If anything, his smile widened. My father did many terrible things. That's precisely why I wanted to meet you. He gestured toward the door. Please, come inside. Let me show you what he really did to your parents and what Dominic Harrington isn't telling you. Every instinct screamed at Zara to leave. This man was dangerous. She could feel it in the way he watched her, the way his words dripped with practiced sincerity. But she thought about Dominic's version of events, about the fabricated evidence, about 20 years of silence. She needed to see for herself. 1 hour, she said. That's all you get. That's all I need. Tristan led her through the front doors into a foyer that could have housed her entire apartment building. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, portraits of stern-faced Ashfords lining the walls like a gallery of predators. My father kept meticulous records, Tristan said, guiding her toward a study at the end of a long hallway. Evidence of every deal he ever made, including the one that separated your parents. The study doors swung open. What waited inside would change everything Zara thought she knew. The study was lined with filing cabinets, rows upon rows of them, floor to ceiling, each one labeled with dates and names. Decades of documents, a paper trail that stretched back further than Zara had been alive. Tristan crossed to a cabinet near the window and pulled out a thick folder. 1997, he said, placing it on the desk between them. The year my father decided to destroy Dominic Harrington's personal life. Zara opened the folder. Inside were photographs. A young woman with dark curly hair, Iris unmistakably, sitting across from a man at a restaurant. Another photo showing them entering a hotel together. Receipts for room service. Phone records with highlighted numbers. These are the images my father showed Dominic, Tristan explained. The proof that your mother was having an affair. Zara's stomach turned. She'd heard about these from Dominic, but seeing them was different. Tangible. Real. They're fake, Tristan continued. Every single one. He pulled out additional documents. Invoices from a photo editing company. Contracts with actors hired to pose with Iris. Payments to private investigators who specialized in fabrication rather than discovery. My father spent $60,000 creating a lie convincing enough to break a young man's heart. Tristan's voice was flat, clinical. He hired actors, forged documents, manipulated timestamps on photographs. It was surgical. Zara stared at the evidence. Hard copies, original invoices, the paper trail proving everything Dominic had claimed. Why are you showing me this? Because I'm not my father. Tristan leaned against the desk. Victor Ashford was a monster. He destroyed people for profit and pleasure. When he died 3 years ago, I inherited everything, including the truth about what he'd done. So, you're the good guy now. Tristan laughed softly. I'm a realist. The sins of the father don't automatically pass to the son. I'm showing you this because you deserve to know the truth. Zara closed the folder. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing. Dominic's story checked out. Victor Ashford really had destroyed her parents' relationship with manufactured lies. But Tristan's smile still made her skin crawl. That's only half of what Dominic isn't telling you, he said quietly. There's more, and it's worse. Tristan pulled out a second folder. This one was thicker. More recent. Harrington Industries, he said, spreading documents across the desk. The empire your father is so desperate to hand you. Zara looked at the papers. Financial statements, debt reports, legal filings. What am I looking at? A sinking ship. Tristan pointed to specific figures. Harrington Industries is drowning. Bad investments, failed drug trials, lawsuits from patients harmed by rushed pharmaceuticals. Your father has hidden the damage well, but the numbers don't lie. Zara scanned the documents. Revenue declining, liabilities increasing, debt obligations that ran into the hundreds of millions. He's offering you 40% of nothing, Tristan continued. Worse than nothing, he's tying you to obligations you never agreed to. Once your name is on those documents, you become personally liable for debts, lawsuits, and regulatory violations that could follow you for the rest of your life. The words landed like punches. Why would he do that? Because he needs a fall guy, someone to take the blame when everything collapses. Tristan's eyes were cold. He's not trying to make amends, Miss Kinsley. He's trying to protect his legacy by sacrificing his own daughter. Zara wanted to reject it, to call it another manipulation from another Ashford. But the documents looked legitimate. The numbers added up. And Dominic had admitted himself that Harrington was facing serious problems. The Ashford Group holds a significant portion of that debt, Tristan added. When Harrington Industries defaults, and it will, we'll be positioned to absorb the valuable assets and discard the rest, including me, unless you choose differently. Tristan slid a business card across the desk. I'm offering you information, not an alliance. Verify everything I've shown you. Hire your own accountants. Dig through Dominic's books. He produced a briefcase from beneath the desk and placed it in front of her. Copies of everything. Take them. Compare them to whatever Dominic gives you. His smile returned, sharp and knowing. Then decide who's really lying to you. Zara took the briefcase. She didn't trust Tristan Ashford, but she didn't trust Dominic Harrington either. The only person she could rely on was herself. I'll be in touch, she said. I'm counting on it. That evening, Zara walked into Dominic's office and dropped the briefcase on his desk. Tristan says you're broke. Her voice was steady but sharp. He says this whole thing is a trap, that you're handing me 40% of a disaster so someone else takes the fall when it collapses. Dominic looked at the briefcase, then at his daughter. He didn't flinch. He's not entirely wrong. Zara's breath caught. Harrington Industries is in trouble, Dominic continued. Bad investments, lawsuits, declining revenue. I won't lie to you about that. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out another folder. Thinner, but detailed. But Tristan is exaggerating the damage for his own purposes. He slid the folder toward her. These are the real internal financials, not the version I show the board, not the version Tristan somehow obtained. The actual numbers, verified by independent auditors I trust. Zara opened it cautiously. The company is struggling, but it's not bankrupt. We have 18 months of runway if we restructure carefully. Some divisions are profitable and could be spun off to cover debts. Dominic coughed, that wet, rattling sound that reminded her how little time he had left. Tristan wants you to panic. He wants you to walk away so he can swoop in and take everything. How do I know you're not just a better liar than he is? Dominic nodded slowly, like he'd expected the question. You don't. He reached into another drawer and produced a thick envelope. 8 years ago, when I found you and your mother, I set up a separate trust, protected from Harrington Industries' liabilities, ring-fenced, untouchable by creditors or lawsuits. He handed her the envelope. $30 million, already transferred, in your mother's name and yours. No matter what happens to my company, that money is safe. Zara stared at the documents. Why didn't you mention this before? Because I wanted you to make decisions based on truth, not bribes. Dominic met her eyes. Don't believe me. Don't believe Tristan. Verify everything. Hire whoever you need. I'll open every book, every account, every closet with skeletons in it. Zara stood there, holding 2 sets of documents from 2 different men who both claimed to be telling the truth. One of them was lying. Maybe both of them. The only way to know for certain was to investigate herself. The next 2 weeks became a blur of documents, phone calls, and sleepless nights. Zara hired 3 independent accounting firms, none connected to either Harrington or Ashford. She engaged lawyers who specialized in corporate forensics. She requested access to every financial record Dominic had, and he delivered without hesitation. She also dug into Tristan's documents, traced the sources, cross-referenced figures, looked for discrepancies. Late at night, in her hotel room, she read her mother's unsent letters. Iris's voice came through every word, describing Zara's first loose tooth, her science fair project, the day she graduated high school, and Iris cried in the audience, wishing someone else was there to see it. She took her first steps today, one letter read. You should have been here. You should have been holding her other hand. Zara wiped her eyes and kept reading. The pattern became clear over time. Tristan had exaggerated Harrington's problems, not fabricated them, but amplified them strategically. The company was struggling, but it wasn't the dumpster fire he'd described. Dominic's numbers were closer to the truth. The trust fund was real. The separate protections were legitimate, but that didn't make Dominic innocent. He'd still abandoned them, still hidden for years when he could have stepped forward. The difference was this: Dominic was guilty of cowardice. Tristan was guilty of manipulation. One was a weakness. The other was a weapon. Now, here's something I want you to notice. Everyone in this story has a version of the truth. Dominic has his. Tristan has his. Even Iris has memories shaped by 20 years of pain. But only one person, Zara, is actually checking the facts. She's not going with her gut or following the person who sounds most convincing. She's digging. So let me ask you this, when life hits you with big decisions that could change everything, do you go with the person you feel is right? Or do you dig for proof like Zara? Type facts in the comments if you'd verify everything before making a choice this big. And if you're still here, you're deep in the vault now. Share this video with someone who thinks money fixes everything, because what's coming next proves that it doesn't. Back to the story. The meeting happened in Zara's hotel room. Neutral ground. No corporate offices, no mansions, just a small space with a bed, a chair by the window, and 20 years of unspoken words hanging in the air. Iris sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, looking smaller than Zara had ever seen her. Dominic stood by the window, leaning heavily on his cane, staring out at a city he'd conquered but never truly owned. Zara positioned herself between them. Referee, translator, daughter. Nobody spoke for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Iris broke the silence. "You look old." Dominic turned slowly. His eyes found hers, really found them, for the first time in 2 decades. "Every day without you aged me 10 years. Iris's jaw tightened. Don't you dare try to romanticize this. I'm not. I'm stating a fact." Dominic's voice was barely above a whisper. "You were the only good thing in my life, and I threw you away because I believed a lie. You didn't even ask me." Iris's voice cracked. "You saw those fake photos and you just left. No conversation, no chance to defend myself. I woke up and you were gone. I know. I was pregnant, Dominic. Pregnant and alone and terrified. I had no money, no family, nothing but a baby growing inside me and a broken heart." Dominic closed his eyes. "I know. Do you know what I told myself every night? That maybe you'd come back, that maybe there'd been some mistake, that maybe the man I loved wasn't actually capable of walking away without a word." Tears streamed down Iris's face. "I waited for you. For years I waited." Dominic's hands trembled on his cane. "I don't have excuses. I have explanations, but they're not excuses. Victor showed me those photos and I broke. My worst fear confirmed by the man I trusted." He shook his head. "By the time I learned the truth, you disappeared, changed your name, started over, because I had to survive without you." Zara watched her parents face each other, 2 people whose love had been weaponized against them. Dominic took a shaky step forward, then another. Slowly, painfully, he lowered himself to his knees in front of Iris. The movement cost him. Every joint protested. His breathing became labored. But Dominic Harrington, billionaire, industry titan, a man who had made presidents, knelt on a cheap hotel carpet before the woman he'd wronged. "I was proud," he said, voice breaking. "Insecure, terrified that I didn't deserve you. When Victor showed me that evidence, part of me believed it because believing it was easier than accepting that someone as good as you could actually love someone like me." Iris stared down at him, tears still falling. "You stupid, stupid man. I know. 20 years. 20 years of raising our daughter alone. 20 years of wondering what I did wrong." "You did nothing wrong." Dominic looked up at her with eyes full of agony. "You were perfect. The lie was mine to swallow and mine to suffer for." Iris's hands trembled. "I read your letters," Dominic continued. "Every single one. Zara's first words, her first day of school, the science fair ribbon, graduation. All the moments I missed because I was too much of a coward to face what I'd done. Those weren't meant for you. I know, but I memorized every word anyway." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm dying, Iris. 6 months, maybe less. And all I want, all I care about anymore, is protecting you and our daughter from the mess I've created." Iris stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, her hand reached out. Her fingers touched his weathered face, the first physical contact between them in 20 years. "You broke my heart," she said quietly. "I know. You don't get to fix that with money. I know. You don't get to buy forgiveness. I'm not trying to." Dominic covered her hand with his own. "I'm asking for a chance, not to erase what I did, just to be present. For whatever time I have left." Iris pulled him into an embrace. They held each other on that hotel room floor, both sobbing, 20 years, of grief pouring out in broken sounds that made Zara's chest ache. She slipped quietly into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind her. Some bridges can only be rebuilt without an audience. Zara found a quiet corner of the hotel rooftop and stared out at the city lights. Her mind was racing. Everything she'd believed for 23 years had shifted. The villain wasn't exactly a villain. The victim wasn't entirely a victim. And the real monster, Victor Ashford, was already dead, beyond any justice she could deliver. That left his son. Tristan was playing the same game his father had played. Softer approach, different tactics, but the same objective: destroy the Harringtons and take everything. He'd tried to turn her against Dominic, tried to position himself as the truth-teller, the reasonable alternative. And when that didn't work, he'd handed her documents designed to make her panic and run. Zara wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to be a pawn in anyone's game. Not Dominic's, not Tristan's, not the board members who saw her as an inexperienced girl they could manipulate. The facts were clear now. Dominic was guilty of cowardice and poor judgment, but he hadn't tried to trap her. The trust fund was real. The financial problems were manageable, and Victor Ashford's forged evidence had destroyed her family for profit. The Ashfords had taken 20 years from them. Zara refused to let them take another day. She pulled out her phone and started making calls. Lawyers, accountants, regulatory specialists, people who understood how corporate warfare actually worked. By the time the sun rose, she had the skeleton of a plan. She wouldn't be a passive heir, sitting on Dominic's shares while executives ran the company into the ground. She wouldn't be a figurehead designed to legitimize his legacy. She was going to restructure Harrington Industries herself, use Victor's files as leverage against creditors connected to the Ashfords, expose the fraud to regulators, force Tristan into a defensive position where his only options were retreat or prosecution, turn her family's tragedy into something meaningful. Not revenge. Revenge was what Victor did. This was strategy. This was taking the weapons they'd used against her family and pointing them right back. Zara Kinsley wasn't going to take her father's money. She was going to take his problems and transform them into something no billionaire could buy. The next 10 days moved faster than anything in Zara's life. She met with Harrington's major creditors in quiet conference rooms across the city, men and women in expensive suits who'd been circling the company like predators, waiting for the right moment to strike. Zara gave them something better than a wounded target. She gave them Victor Ashford. Every meeting followed the same pattern. She'd present the evidence of Ashford Group's decades of fraud, forged documents, bribed officials, manipulated markets, crimes that regulators would love to prosecute. Then she'd make her offer, restructure Harrington's debt in exchange for cooperation with federal investigators. A chance to be on the right side of history when the Ashford empire came crashing down. One by one they agreed. Not out of kindness. Creditors didn't operate on kindness, but out of calculation. The Ashfords had made enemies everywhere, and those enemies were eager for a chance at revenge. Between meetings, Zara worked on something else, something personal. The Iris Foundation. 30% of the restructured Harrington Industries would fund a nonprofit dedicated to supporting single mothers, small business owners, and victims of corporate fraud, named after the woman who'd raised Zara alone, who'd built a bakery from nothing, who'd survived 20 years of heartbreak with her dignity intact. Iris didn't know about it yet. That was intentional. The morning of the big board meeting arrived with gray skies and a tension that hung over Manhattan like a fog. Zara stood in front of the mirror in her hotel room, adjusting the collar of a suit she'd bought 3 days ago, the first expensive clothing she'd ever owned. She didn't recognize herself. Good. That meant no one else would either. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. Ready? She typed back, "Meet me in the boardroom in 1 hour." Today was the day everything changed. Tristan Ashford thought he was walking into a victory. The board members thought they were witnessing a routine transition of power. They were all wrong. Zara Kinsley was about to turn her pain into power and take down everyone who tried to use her as a pawn. The boardroom was packed. 24 chairs filled with executives, lawyers, and investors. Cameras from business news outlets lined the back wall. At the far end of the table sat Tristan Ashford, smiling like a man who'd already won. Dominic sat near the head of the table, oxygen tubes in his nostrils, watching his daughter with something that looked like pride. Zara stood at the front of the room, a remote control in her hand. Everyone expected the same announcement: Zara Kinsley, named as sole heir, new CEO of Harrington Industries, ready to lead the company into its next chapter. They got something else entirely: I'm not here to become another corporate figurehead, Zara began, her voice steady as steel. I'm here to announce a complete restructuring of Harrington Industries and to expose the criminal conspiracy that nearly destroyed this company and my family. Murmurs rippled through the room. Zara clicked the remote. The screen behind her lit up with documents, Victor Ashford's files, forged photographs, fraudulent contracts, decades of criminal activity laid bare for everyone to see. 20 years ago, Victor Ashford fabricated evidence to destroy my parents' relationship. He did this to isolate and manipulate Dominic Harrington for his own profit. She clicked again. More evidence. The Ashford Group has engaged in systematic fraud, market manipulation, and bribery for over 3 decades. Tristan's smile faltered. These documents have been verified by independent forensic accountants and submitted to federal regulators this morning. Zara's eyes locked onto Tristan. Speaking of which, Mr. Ashford, you might want to check the lobby. There are some people waiting to speak with you. Tristan stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. 2 federal agents appeared in the doorway. Tristan Ashford, one of them said, we have questions regarding your involvement in ongoing fraud investigations. The color drained from Tristan's face. He looked around the room for allies, for escape routes, for anything that could save him. He found nothing. As the agents escorted him toward the door, Zara called out, your father took 20 years from my family. I'm taking everything back. Tristan was gone before he could respond. The boardroom erupted in chaos, but Zara wasn't finished. She turned back to the room and waited for silence. This isn't about saving my father's ego, Zara said when the room quieted. This is about protecting every innocent person tied to this company. Employees, shareholders, customers, communities. She clicked the remote one final time. The screen displayed the Iris Foundation logo and mission statement. 30% of the restructured Harrington Industries will fund this foundation. It will support single mothers, small business owners, and victims of corporate fraud. She paused, named after my mother. A woman who built a life from nothing while the powerful played games with people's futures. Iris, watching from a side door, covered her mouth with both hands. Zara looked at Dominic. The old man's eyes were streaming with tears, and for the first time, they weren't tears of regret. I will take a leadership role in this company, Zara continued. But my focus isn't profit margins or stock prices. It's ethical rebuilding. Accountability, making sure that what happened to my family never happens to anyone else. She walked to Dominic's chair and placed a hand on his shoulder. Welcome home, Dad. The word echoed through the silent room. Dad, said publicly, said deliberately, said to a man who'd spent 20 years believing he'd never hear it. Dominic reached up and covered her hand with his own, too overwhelmed to speak. The cameras flashed. The executives whispered. The world outside those windows had no idea what had just happened, but they would soon. Dominic Harrington had tried to buy forgiveness. What he received instead was something far more expensive: accountability, truth, and a second chance he hadn't earned, but had fought for anyway. Now I want to ask you something real. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if you've ever had to decide between revenge and doing what's right, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Comment home if you believe people can change, even after terrible mistakes, even after decades of running. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? This vault is full of stories about secrets, power, and the choices that define who we become. But we're not done yet. The final piece of this story still needs to be told. The doctors had given Dominic 6 months. He made it 14. Stubbornness, some said. Better medical care, others argued. But Iris knew the truth. He was holding on for moments he'd already missed once. Cedar Falls welcomed him quietly. No fanfare, no press releases. Just a sick old man moving into the apartment above the bakery, taking the small guest room Zara had slept in as a child. Sweet Grace had expanded by then. The empty storefront next door now housed additional ovens, more seating, and a small army of staff Iris trained personally. Business school theory met flour-dusted wisdom every single day. Dominic spent his mornings watching Iris work. Sometimes she'd let him fold boxes or count inventory, small tasks that made him feel useful instead of dying. He was there when Zara married the accountant who'd helped expose the Ashford fraud, a quiet man named Marcus, who loved spreadsheets almost as much as he loved Zara's sharp mind. The wedding happened in the same small church where Iris used to pray for miracles she'd stopped believing in. Zara walked down the aisle with both parents, Iris on her left, Dominic on her right. The photographer captured the moment, 3 people who'd been shattered, now holding each other upright. 8 months later, Dominic held his granddaughter for the first time. She had Iris's eyes, his jawline, Zara's stubborn grip. He whispered something to the baby that only she heard, tears streaming down his weathered face. 3 weeks after that, he died in his sleep. Iris was holding his hand. Zara sat at the foot of the bed. The baby slept in a bassinet nearby. No lawyers, no business deals, no unfinished wars. His headstone, chosen by Iris, bore 3 simple words beneath his name. He came home. He died a billionaire. But that's not what mattered in the end. Every year on the anniversary of his death, Iris and Zara returned to that hilltop cemetery with a box from Sweet Grace. Sometimes cinnamon rolls, sometimes the lemon bars he'd become obsessed with in his final months. They'd sit on the grass beside his stone and talk to him like he'd just stepped out for coffee. They told him about the foundation, how it had funded legal help for 43 families trapped in predatory contracts, how it had backed 19 small businesses owned by single mothers, how it kept landlords honest and gave people second chances they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. They told him about the bakery, now a fixture in Cedar Falls, high schoolers earning their first paychecks, single parents finding community over coffee at the corner tables. They told him about his granddaughter's first steps across the kitchen floor, flour dusting her tiny shoes. The money Dominic left didn't erase the past. It couldn't return the birthdays he'd missed or repair the years Iris spent crying alone. It couldn't give Zara back the father-shaped hole in her childhood. But it did something else. It became a tool for repair, for backing honest people, for preventing others from experiencing the kind of pain that comes when powerful people treat lives like chess pieces. Here's what their story teaches. Money doesn't rewind time, but used honestly, it can patch the holes you tore in the world. Don't build life-changing decisions on stories you never verified or fears someone else planted in your head. Real wealth isn't what you hoard. It's what you repair, who you protect, the bridges you rebuild after burning them. The richest people aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones brave enough to face what they broke, tell the truth about it, and spend whatever they have left making things right. If this story hit you somewhere real, if you've ever had to choose between holding a grudge and building something better, share it with someone wrestling with that same choice right now. Drop legacy in the comments if you believe what we leave in people matters more than what we leave to them. And if you're not subscribed to Xavier's Billionaire Secret Vault, what are you waiting for? These stories don't just entertain, they show you how power really works and how ordinary people can take it back. Thanks for staying till the end. I'll see you in the next vault.